This is ospreywatch.org. It's packed with tons of helpful information on not only osprey, but nesting osprey. And after weeks of searching not just for wildlife, but rather scouting out great wildlife locations, I stumbled upon this little gem of a pond that just might be the perfect location for wildlife photography. Supporting so many different types of animals, most notably birds. From seagulls, swallows, yellow-headed blackbirds, ducks, geese, kingfisher, and one very chill blue heron that the locals call Fred. Hey Fred! But as you can probably guess, these are not the birds that brought me to this location. This was osprey. And for days I had been scouting for the perfect location. Not just any location, a huge lake, and the osprey could be anywhere, but this was special. It was small, giving me access to the birds in close proximity. And my goal was to photograph one of these majestic birds in soft, beautiful light, in fairly close proximity and just milliseconds before plunging into the water at breakneck speeds. Talons at the ready. And that was the goal. Sadly, I missed it when it finally happened. However, I was presented with this amazing opportunity to photograph the osprey emerging from the water like a phoenix rising, fish in talons. And I'm so very grateful for this experience as well as the photos and videos I was able to capture. I'll share some of my favorites as we move forward. But more so, I'm so excited about what's to come because over the last few weeks, I have encountered so much more wildlife. It's been incredible and I wanted to document and share my experience here on YouTube. Maybe you'll find this helpful. The story begins here, Sprague Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park, where there was lots of reports of wildlife activity, specifically moose. And not just moose, but twin newborns. So I headed out to this beautiful alpine lake in our national park, and over the coming days, I would photograph moose after moose, pika, grazed nutcrackers, and I ran into a monster elk whose velvet was just beginning to shed. And although the light was poor, it was such an amazing opportunity. And it was my time in Rocky Mountain National Park that would lead me to this next adventure, osprey. Because as I showed up to Sprague Lake one early morning, I started setting up to shoot this beautiful moose who was bedded down, and everything was perfect, and above me was this osprey that was fishing. And I was so focused on the moose that sadly I missed the shot of the osprey. And this happened multiple times, and it really led me to wanting to capture one of these beautiful birds before they would migrate south for the winter. And that brings me to point number one, which is it's really painfully obvious, but it's really been helpful in me to motivate me to get out. And that is to really identify how far I'm willing to drive to a location to photograph something I'd get really excited about. For me, an hour is no problem, even as much as an hour and a half, maybe on a weekend. And that was the starting point. One of the things I started noticing, great wildlife photographers, they spend time traveling. They're in their car often. They're out hiking often. Being a great wildlife photographer involves so much more than just taking a photo. That brings me to item number two, which is to search Google in a very specific way. Now, I just want to mention one thing before I move forward, and that is I've done really all of these things, but it's doing all of these things together in real time that has really allowed me to up my wildlife photography and really find so many more animals. I started searching Google for wildlife refuge, wildlife sanctuary, and I combined these types of phrases with locations that are within an hour drive. So Wildlife Refuge Denver, Wildlife Sanctuary Denver, Wildlife Sanctuary Longmont, Boulder, etc. And let me tell you, I found so many great websites, articles, and more that gave me ideas of where to scout out my next shoot. You know, and I'll also mention I've gotten hung up in the past with these epic wildlife locations. Grand Teton National Park, Yellowstone National Park. I don't know what it is about Montana, but man, it's special. But I also didn't really appreciate my own backyard, what I have available to me, what's accessible, and some of my best photos. In fact, I'll go out on a limb and say my best photos were taken close to home. Item number 3 is to get social, to get on Facebook, to follow groups. There are a lot of groups dedicated to locations that are probably pretty close to you. So for example, I can access a great wildlife refuge in my area, Rocky Mountain Arsenal, and there's actually a Facebook group for that, and there's another Facebook group for Friends of Rocky Mountain National Park, etc. And these groups can be so helpful, helping you plan a trip, identifying where might be a great location, and at the same time there are some rules, and some of these groups, they want to protect the wildlife, and I'm definitely in that same camp. I always want to be really respectful of the wildlife, and I don't want to impede upon the wildlife or make them feel nervous. And these groups have really allowed me to identify what's available to photograph right now, like my next time I head out. And item number 4 is to scout out specific animals based on what you're seeing online, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, etc. And by doing that, you start really searching in specific ways. That's how I found that ospreywatch.org. I actually found that location after this very incredible opportunity, which led to some great photos of this osprey. And then step number 5, and this is where it kind of deviates. Once on location, be open as mentioned. Each time I was really specific about wanting to capture a specific animal, and at the same time I try to balance that out with photographing what's accessible and available right now. Instead of setting up for a moose where I don't know if I have a shot yet, photograph that osprey. It seems easy until you get into one of these situations. There's one other really powerful tip, and it's really based on light, morning, evening, and being on these locations at the right time. And this video on the screen really demonstrates just how powerful it is to leverage golden hour. Click this video, I'll see you there, and thank you for watching.